Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Book of Law. We're very excited to be with you. Rachel is in her home in New York. I am in my home in Texas, a very rainy and wet Texas. I can't believe the weather here. So if you're listening to us from Texas and you went a couple days without power, we have empathy for you. Very sorry about that. Keep your heads down. Looks like this weekend is going to be a nice one anyway. So today's topic is work-life balance. I started calling it work-life freedom several years ago because it was such a topic. It's still a topic. It's been a topic forever. The actual balancing of your career drive, your responsibilities at an office, at work, the not-for-profit tasks you're on, your time in the military, which is a harder one, to try to balance relationships, extracurricular activities, and your responsibilities that you're paid to perform so you can feed yourself. It's actually quite a heavy topic. Rachel has a lot of interesting things to say. I wanted to kick this call off because I've struggled with this severely. I've actually been called a robot at work. I've had coworkers and bosses say, "Oh, so you're not a machine." And that wasn't just referencing the dead look on my face or whatever I'm executing at the time. It's that I didn't know how to throttle a balance. And I've been married for 23 years. This a couple months ago in March. Been with Lisa for 25 years. We met at work. She is a bit of a hard charger, type A, probably even more so than me in a lot of cases. And maybe that's what attracted each other at work. And there's a lot of people that meet their spouses or significant others at work. But she was a single mom when we met, and she was really good at getting out of there on time to go get Berkeley when Berkeley needed to be picked up, because Berkeley was small. I mean, when we met, Berkeley was 3. When we were married, she was 6. So Lisa did a lot of years as a single mom, balancing hard charging career, sales, relationship management, and a daughter. I didn't have any of that, but I just loved work. I loved work. There was lots of years where I never left. It felt like I was there a long time. I didn't do 9 to 5 ever. And our industry isn't really 9 to 5, by the way. Like if you're in payments, if you're in this form of banking, at least the stuff I was doing, it was 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Someone's at an ATM, someone's using a debit card, someone's accessing accounts at a bank, whatever. And they want help all the time. There is no, "Oh, I'm off." Like a lot of jobs in this industry are on. But there's still a way to figure out how to be just as focused and aware at home, present at home, a word I've learned the last 5 to 8 years, which just sounds crazy. I'm a 50-year-old man talking about, I just learned what present meant. Like there's a lot of times Berkeley would tell me at the dining room table, she'd say, "Are you talking to Troy? Are you talking to Bippin?" I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Well, your mouth is moving, but you're not saying anything." So I'm at the table, we're having dinner, and I'm having a conversation in my head, and my mouth is moving. So I'm not present. I was still at the office. I was still at work, and I missed a lot of things with her growing up. When our son came along, I missed a lot of things. So this topic for me is very real, and my relationship is good, thank God. Like maybe if we didn't meet at work and she didn't have the work ethic she did and the type A, we wouldn't be good because I worked so much in the past. But I don't want to paint that picture. There's nothing wrong. It's just I'm hyper aware. And last piece before I hand it over to you, Rachel, because I know you have some things that you want to say as well. When I joined Checkall last year, and it was probably one of the most impactful conversations that I've had with a future coworker before. For the audience, Rachel said to me, "Hey, when's the last time you had a vacation?" Because there is a version of the 1,000-yard stare in corporate America where you just kind of like glazed over. You're like, and obviously you saw that in me. And for the audience, Rachel saw that in me and said, why don't you, here's your last day at this place. Let's make this your first day at this place and go away. She's like, "When's the last time you had 7 days in a row off?" And here's the answer, everybody. Until last June, I hadn't had 7 days in a row off in 20 plus years. Just didn't do it. If Lisa and I went away, it was 3 days here, maybe 4 days. Or I would bookend a weekend in New York or somewhere. If I was on a business trip, Lisa would join me and I would call that like a vacation, but you're not really decompressing. So I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Rachel because that 7 days for Lisa and I were like, the first 2 days was hard because my phone wasn't ringing. I really did behave. She was like, don't check anything. Now I did do some HR training on the app for check if Lisa was taking a nap and I was on the beach. Hell of a way to do your HR training on a beach. But I was totally chilled out. And it was so nice to be present with my wife because my employer had the thought to say, hey, this is going to be hard when you get here. You should take a minute. So Rachel, in front of the world, thank you for that. And everyone listening, if you don't have a Rachel, be your own Rachel and look yourself in the mirror and say, I need a break. I'll stop talking.
And here it's a palate cleanser, right? So many people just run from one thing to the next thing. And we all, when we're in the moment, we have this inflated sense of urgency about most things. And again, some things are life and death, but in most work environments, it's not. And we were waiting for Patrick for so long that another 6 or 7 or 8 days wouldn't have mattered. So I said, your first day is then, but do not show up at work until, I don't know, 7 or 10 days later. So it's a great palate cleanser. And I think more employers should facilitate that because employees, especially new hires who want to impress, I think some people feel bad saying, hey, you know what, I'd really like to take a break in between. Or some people can't afford it, right? Because then it's not paid time. So I'm glad you were able to get that. And by the way, you should also take vacations while you work here. You've got a great team.
I didn't plan ahead on me saying that and then you saying that to me. Yeah, I do. We are in October.
Yeah.
I haven't even told you yet. We are taking a 7-day break.
Oh, amazing. Okay. That's great. I'm very happy to hear that.
There you go.
I'm very happy to hear that. So I have so many things to say on this topic. So many things. And I think one of the cool parts about living life and getting older is you have perspective, right? You heard Patrick share, maybe some of his regrets looking back. When I look back, I think, I'm also someone that I've always loved what I do. I've always been self-driven. I enjoy my work and I always want to be able to do everything. And, you can't do everything all at the same time and do everything well, right? So looking back, not everything was perfect, for sure not. But I have greater perspective. So a few things that I want to share is the first thing is a big challenge of this whole work life, whether you call it balance or integration or fluidity or whatever the newest word for it is. I think the most important thing to consider is that it's for everyone. It's not only for women and it's not only for moms, it's for everyone. And it's not only relating to caregiving. And stop and think about that for a second. Because I think very often when people think about work-life integration, it's my kids get home at 4:00. And so how am I going to take conference calls from 5 to 6 or what happens during summer break or whatever? But really, I think everyone needs to figure out how to integrate their life. And whether it's people you're taking care of, whether it's animals you're taking care of, whether it's a hobby, whether you train for the Olympics or you're training for a marathon or you're studying for a PhD, I think almost everyone has stuff in their life that they want to figure out how to blend in with their work. And I think just to maintain our emotional well-being, right, we all have to figure out how to balance all those things. I think life is complex. And things that may be urgent now may not be urgent later. And so I think when we think about, oh, I wish we can do it all, right? I think we can do it all, but just not at the same time. And I think if we suspend judgment a little bit for ourselves and for other people, I think what we'll recognize is everyone has different circumstances and support structures, right? Somebody might have, like I remember years ago, a executive was saying, oh, we shouldn't hire this woman because she's got young kids and I don't think she'll be able to do that. And I said, well, how do you know that? Did you ask her if she's able to meet the travel expectations of the job? I said, maybe she doesn't have kids. Maybe she doesn't like her kids. Maybe she has a live-in mother-in-law who takes care of her kids. I said, you don't know any of these things and you're making assumptions about her because of what you know about your own life. And so I think understanding everyone has different circumstances, everyone has different priorities, and everyone has different capabilities. Some people can handle more and some people may not want to or may not be able to. So somebody once said this to me years ago, and this is one of the things where I'm kicking myself because I forget where I heard it from, and I would love to be able to give credit because I didn't come up with this on my own. But somebody once said to me, life is like a 3-lane highway. There's a slow, your career is like a 3-lane highway. There's a slow lane, there's a medium lane, and a fast lane. And you can switch lanes at any point. You just need to signal. I thought that was really cool because, right? Because I think in life and our circumstances change in life. Like, for example, years ago when my kids were really young, I never did after work happy hours or events because if their bedtime was at 7, I wanted to be able to get home and have that hour or two with them before they went to sleep. Now my kids are young adults. They have busier lives than I do, right? And so they don't really want to see me at 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock, right? They want me up with them at like 10 or 11 when they're hanging out watching whatever game. So I think our schedules and our circumstances change. I think people find themselves taking care of elderly parents, right? So that might impact them at different points in their career. So I think that the communication piece is really what's critical. Being able to communicate to the people that you work with, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's your boss, whether it's a career counselor, right? What is going on in your life and how much time and how much brain space you're able or you want to devote to your work at this particular time, or that there's something going on and you may be distracted, right? There's a lot of things that can be done. And then I think also communicating to your family and letting them know, hey, it's going to be really brutal for the next 2 weeks because we have this big project that's rolling out. I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be as present for these 2 weeks, but I promise afterwards it's going to get better. Just that communication can make things get better because I think sometimes we get stuck and we feel like, oh, this is going to be all or nothing. And life is not like that. So another person who I learned from is Gwynne Shotwell, who's the president of SpaceX, one of Elon Musk's companies. And I heard her speak years ago at the Women in Technology International Conference. And what she said resonated with me so much. She said, your work and life will never balance on a day-to-day basis. Never. Some days your life is going to win. Some days your work is going to win, right? If your kid is sick and you have to miss a meeting, you're not balanced. If you have a crazy project and you have to pull an all-nighter and you miss your kids, I don't know, sports practice thing, your job is going to win that day. And that's okay. She says, what you need to do is look a few weeks ahead and a few weeks back and a few months ahead and a few months back and calibrate that balance and just make sure that you're where you want to be. And that stuck with me. And then years later, I was in a job where I traveled to Boston every other week and I was there for a couple of days. And my son, who was, how old was he then? He was probably like, I don't know, 12 or 13, 12 maybe. And he said to me, he's like, one day he says, if anyone asks me what you do for work, I'm going to say, you just go to Boston. And I was like, I was crushed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mother. And then I realized, I said, okay, let me ask him more. I said, why do you think that? How often do you think I go to Boston? He said, well, you go to Boston every week. So I said, oh, let's look at the calendar together. And I showed him the calendar and I said, okay, so I was in Boston for 2 days here. And then I was home for 12 days. And then I was away for 3 days. And then I was home for 8 days. And I said, I know it feels like a lot. And what I talked to him about was figuring out a way to spend more time together on those days so that I was here. But, I've always tried to look ahead and look back and just make sure that I'm not getting out of whack, even if I get stuck in either direction. Like, again, last week of June, I just spoke with someone earlier today. Last week of June, my life is going to be crazy because I have to get the kids ready for camp, right? But I'll more than make up for it, right? The next few weeks when they're gone. So I think, again, life is interesting. Life evolves, circumstances change. And I think the communication is really, really important.
I think I love the SpaceX president and how she said that.
Right?
In the beginning, and I don't know if I got it all out, but when I said I stopped saying work-life balance and I say work-life freedom, because it's a freedom to choose. Like you actually have more power in your work than you may think you do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to take care of your kid, take care of your kid. If there's an important soccer game, you make it to the soccer game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's cool. What was the event where she was speaking?
So it's an organization. It was called WITI, Women in Technology International. I don't know if they're still around. It was a giant conference. There were like 2,000 people there. It was probably.
Boy, she's the right one to have at a conference like that. That's great.
It was probably 15 years ago when almost nobody knew about Elon Musk. Like I think SpaceX was his main thing. I think he had gone from PayPal, but she was amazing. And I think, as you said, some people, Have you ever worked with someone who's like, oh, I have to leave early, I have an appointment, and really
Yes.
it's their kid's like ballet recital and they just don't want to tell anyone?
Yeah, I have.
How sad is that?
Very. It made me question myself a few times because why would somebody not just tell me where they were going?
Yeah.
So I tried real hard to create transparent environments where it was okay to say you were going to your kid's ballet recital or whatever it was. I think that's a good thing.
It's amazing. And
A really good.
I think sometimes there are unwritten rules in a company, right, that make it not okay because people sort of see you as less committed if you're
Yeah.
spending time on other
That's
things.
that's a great segue because I told everybody, I told Rachel in the beginning, I want to talk about this one thing. So here it goes.
Mhm.
Like the unwritten or unsaid pressure to never leave. And never leave is pretty black and white. No one, that's not real. I wanted the dialogue with everybody here so maybe you could learn from it or maybe recognize it a little easier. And Rachel, I wanted you to opine based on some of the things that you've read and some of the studying you've done, just your own lens as a senior HR professional, as a business executive responsible for talent. Where do you think that comes from? Like, is every level, is it a culture thing? Is it every level of the organization? And by the way, I've never worked for anybody who said, no, you can't go to your kid's baseball game. No, you can't go away for your anniversary weekend. No one's ever said that to me. I've always operated with an unwritten or unsaid thing hovering that said, work more. Is that, what's your read on that?
It's so interesting. I've seen that phenomenon in different places, and I think it comes mostly from examples that other people set, right? So think about who is perceived favorably or has a positive reputation or is receiving accolades, and for what? Are those people receiving accolades for working around the clock? Like when somebody gets an award and they're highlighted at some town hall and they're like, hey, Joe Schmo, director of whatever, he gets the gold award for achievement because he worked 47 hours a day and he did this and he did that and he even missed this thing that was important to him because this was so important. People hear that and they're like, ooh, I want to get those credits too. So sometimes it's about the reward systems that are set up and what gets acknowledged. I think the most it's all about precedent, and it's sometimes these unwritten rules are stuck in the past. They don't exist anymore, but because people aren't challenging their assumptions, they stick around. I'll give you an example. I won't mention the name of the company, but I used to work with somebody who was a head of HR at a very well-known corporation. You would all recognize the name if I shared it. And she told me that their benefits plan had a disproportionately high number of urinary tract infection claims. And it's because their employees were not leaving their desk to go to the bathroom because they felt like they had to have FaceTime and they had to keep cranking. How horrible is that? Like,
I'm not sure why I look.
oh my gosh, right? Like for what? For what end?
I'm laughing because I have to explain why I was laughing.
Okay.
I mean, Lisa was pulled out on a stretcher multiple times in our younger years because she wasn't drinking water. Because she just, and she loved, look, that girl loved to work. Her list was important.
Yeah.
And we still laugh about it. Like, because the call center you've seen some of these call centers with a giant glass wall. So when you're giving tours, you can see
Yes.
everything. The freight elevator, you go by that call center, and she got pulled out on a stretcher so many times. The employees were like, "Oh, there goes the lady that doesn't drink water again."
But you know what? Nobody was looking out for her and
No.
saying, "Hey," right? So I think the when you have unwritten rules that drive behaviors, the culture champions, whether it's HR, whether it's executives, whether it's whoever, in every company it's different, they need to figure out how to address it. A friend of mine was an extremely accomplished trader at a very prestigious Wall Street investment bank. And she was one of the only women on the trading floor. And she had 4 kids at that point. Now she has 5, but she had 4 kids. And she did not ever mention anything about mommyhood. She didn't have a picture of her family on her desk. It was almost like these kids did not exist. She came into work. She talked about finance stuff. She talked about other interests. She did not feel comfortable because she felt like if she would talk about her kids, then people would assume she's on the mommy track and they would take her less seriously. It was only after I recruited her to come to a different company that had a much more family friendly environment. And she said to me, "Oh my gosh, people asked me about my family." And she saw other men and women talk about their kids and say, "Hey, you know what? I have to leave early tomorrow. I have my kids, whatever." And they weren't making up excuses. And so she saw that and she said, "It is safe to do that here because these people are successful and they do that too."
Well, how
So
far back is this? I'm not dating you. I'm just saying how far back is this story with her kids?
I would say probably about 10 years.
It's not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
I mean, that
Not that.
sounds like a late 80s, 90s
It's
version of the
so,
story.
and I think it's because some leaders are stuck there, right? Some leaders are stuck in those, maybe what they would consider the
Stuck
good
there
old
meaning
days.
it's worked for them.
It's
It's
worked
still
for,
working for them.
yeah,
Don't fix it if it ain't broke. In their
yeah,
head.
yeah. And every time people say, "Oh my gosh, the robots are coming, AI is going to take all of our jobs," the first thing I think is AI will take all the busy work so that we can use our brain power and the limited hours that we have in the day to do the sophisticated work that require human cognition, right? And then we can actually pursue. And again, for some people, it's their families. For other people, it might be a hobby or another interest. But I think, we are multidimensional people. And I think we are better for it when we bring our whole selves to work with everything. If we turn ourselves into robots and burn ourselves out, we're not doing anyone any favors.
Yeah. The traditional role commentary we were exchanging before we started recording, Rachel, will you take a turn on that since you brought up moms, I think twice now, three times with you included? Like, we men's view of work life balance, women's view of work life balance, or at least how they're put, what boxes they're put into because of their gender?
Yeah, and I'll be careful because I know in different regions of the country and in different cultural groups and in different faith communities and in different generations, right? This might not all be the same, I think, but in some pockets of our society, traditional gender roles still exist, where it's the assumption that when there's a baby, right, the mom is going to scale down her career or the mom is going to take a career break, right, and the dad is going to go to work. And I think for a lot of families, that works really well. I think for some families, I think some of the dads really wish they could spend more time with their kids, right? But there's this societal expectation for them to be the breadwinner, to go and put in all these hours. And I think some of the moms they love their children and they love their family, but they're not like, they don't necessarily enjoy like hanging out at the park for 14 hours a day or like going to arts and crafts activities. Like they just don't like that stuff. And so I think, what happened for many, many years is families just kind of followed expectations, right, of traditional gender norms. And there wasn't necessarily a choice of how are we going to manage and juggle and balance our responsibilities as a family. And so I think some men, might look back and say, "I wish I had the ability to take a career break or to spend more time with my kids, or I really love doing these. I love hanging out with my kid on his bike outside," right? And I think some moms kind of wish that, they had the ability to do that. And really, in a lot of cases, it was just sometimes in our minds, we build up these expectations. Sometimes there's judgment from other people. Like I remember so clearly, I went to my kids, I think it was like a kindergarten, like graduation or celebration or something like that. And so it was like 10 o'clock in the morning and I rearranged my schedule and I was there. My husband was there too. And the teacher said, and this is like, so he's 17 now. So it was like 12 years ago. So not such a long time ago. And the teacher said, "Okay, everyone, let's get going so all the dads can get back to work." And so a friend of mine who's a physician, we looked at each other and like, then we looked at the teacher with these like glaring eyes, right? Like, again, some people, based on their worldview, right? Sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's other things, they feel that. And I think that unfortunately everyone suffers, right? So what I am very encouraged by is I think that, as we become more enlightened, right? Maybe more progressive in some areas, right? As the world becomes more diverse, I hope that families and people and partners will be able to take the time and say, what works best for our situation, right? Which of us, maybe one of our careers is a little bit more flexible or portable. Maybe one of us is more interested in taking time off, right? Or I think it may not matter. And so one indication that I have is, I think I've mentioned on a few of these about programs that I used to run that were focused on assisting the reentry for women returning to the workforce after an extended career break. Did I ever tell you about this, Patrick? Did we talk about? We didn't talk about it. So this
Not
started.
in one of these. We've talked about it, just
Yeah.
us in the office.
So this started as actually Goldman Sachs. I'm told is the first company that did it, and they actually trademarked the word returnship, which is an internship, but it's a returnship. And so a good friend of mine, her name is Carol Fishman Cohen. She runs a company called iRelaunch. She actually was she's a Harvard Business School alum, and she was the subject of a case study called The 40-Year-Old Intern before the movie came out. So everyone knows the movie, The 40-Year-Old. This was like maybe 20 years ago. Anyway, she started this company to ease the reentry for women who are returning to the workforce after extended career break. Right. So, and sometimes it's because your kids are older and, you've got an empty nest. Sometimes it's circumstances, right? Sometimes it's financial situations change, marriages break up, and all of a sudden you have to work, right? Sometimes people took off to care for a personal health issue or to take care of parents. And then they were like, okay, now I want to come back to the workforce. And it was really hard to do that. And so for years, she ran these conferences and she ran coaching, and it was only women. And these were women who were doctors and lawyers and journalists and like consultants, highly educated. And while they were on their career breaks, they were not on the couch watching Netflix. They were running their school's PTOs. They were starting small businesses. They were selling skincare on Facebook. Like they were running nonprofits. They were volunteering. And it was really hard for them to come back because nobody wanted to look at them. They had such a career break. Their tech skills, their confidence was down. And so her programs are amazing. So I've run these programs in the UK, in Japan, in India, in the US. They're amazing. And the coolest thing is that these programs are now starting to be much more gender diverse. Whereas there was like one or two men in each cohort, now I don't know what the exact numbers are, I can check, but it's much more diverse, which means that, many men are able to say, you know what, I'm going to take a career break for whatever reason, right? And then there is a mechanism to help them get back on track. So I think, again, a lot of this conversation was centered only around women for a really long time. And I would like for us to think about just how this is a human issue, right? And how it affects everyone across the board. And if we can level the playing field, right, then everyone wins. And then the workforce doesn't miss out on great talent. Families get the right kind of support that they need, and more people find more fulfillment.
Yeah, that's well said. Here, I'll just say a couple more things and turn it over to you, and you can tell them about the next episode. Um, so if I were to sum up this conversation, and Rachel, you should before you talk about the next episode as well, just a few lessons from my career and my time for everyone to take in and make your own decisions and make your own calls. But I don't regret any of the decisions I've made in my career, but I did miss opportunities that I just kind of shake my head at myself because you can't go back in time. And I guess that's really what I want to sum up with is it doesn't come back. It just keeps, it only goes one way, time, right? Look at the hand of your watches, or if you wear an electronic watch, whatever that is, but you can't make time go backward. You can't get back time that you've lost or missed. But I also wouldn't walk around with regret either, which I already said I don't. But try to reduce the missed opportunities. I would have enjoyed more time with Berkeley through elementary school, junior high, high school, before she went off to college and then the military. And I've made a real effort with her as an adult to get more time. Like when she was stationed up in the Northwest, I went up there every time I could and I would stay an extra day or two just to hang out with her and take her to dinner and get to know her as an adult. Because, like your kids are different as adults than they're when they're younger. But again, that's now. Right? I'm trying to be better going forward. So if you're listening and you have these opportunities come up, work will always be there. And if you work for people who overtly make you feel bad for trying to execute work-life freedom, then go.
Find a new job.
Go. Don't. There's lots of things that people can do. It's scary to say, I'm going to go. And I'm a guy that did 26 years in one place over multiple acquisitions, of course, before I made the decision to join Rachel and Shai here at Checkall. But looking back on it, there was a lot of off ramps I could have taken to improve my work life freedom opportunities. And again, I loved where I worked. I loved the people I worked with. So no regrets. But if I could change a slice or two of the pie that I've been consuming as a corporate warrior, I probably would have found a little more opportunities to take to get to know my family better over time, and my friends and even my parents, like spending time with my parents. And thank God they're still around. They're right down the street here. But I'll miss a lot of opportunities with them too. So if you're listening, I'm not saying work less. I'm saying make wiser decisions about where you spend your time when you have the opportunities, and so you can have more experiences with people.
Well said. And if you're a leader who looks back and says, I should have, I could have, I wish, right? You have a chance now to inspire and set a better example for the people that work with you and that work for you, and to remind people that life is short, right? And so the thing I would say is focus on the important moments. I think sometimes we get caught up in things that aren't important, and it goes both ways. It could be that we'll miss a family event, or we'll miss our yoga class, or we'll miss I don't know, something, because there's this meeting that happens every week at this time. And God forbid, if I miss that meeting, the sky's going to fall in. And really, that meeting is, in the scheme of things, is not super duper important, and nothing will happen if you miss it. So I think sometimes we lose track. I think it also works in the opposite direction, where we miss a family thing, right, to do a work thing, and we beat ourselves up on that family thing, like, oh my gosh, my family's going to hate me because I missed that thing. And sometimes that's not even important. And so what I've started to do over the past few years is, sometimes because subjectively, it's really hard to gauge the level of importance on something when you're enmeshed in it, right? And that's when you're a parent, that's when you're a family member, it's when you're somebody, at work. And so I remember there was this one, I don't even remember what it was. It was like this parents event at my kids' school. And I really didn't want to go. Like, it would have been like a 4-hour commitment with all the driving and the parking and the traffic and I remember thinking, oh, okay, if I go, these are all the things I won't be able to do. And here's what I'm going to have to make up all these things. And I said, what? I'm just going to ask my kid if it's important to him. And so you can't do this with like a 4-year-old, obviously, but I think he was probably about 14 or 15. And I said, okay, so there's this event at your school on, I don't know, Tuesday morning. I'm ready to be there, and I'm excited about being there if it's important to you. On a scale of 1 to 5, how important is this event to you? Like, is it important to you that I'm there? I said, tell me honestly.
That's smart.
If it's important to you, I will be there and I'll be so happy. But if it's not important to you, then there's something else that I might need to do. And he's like, oh, I don't care if you come. And he really didn't care. And I'm like, afterwards, I said, I would have beat myself up to go to this thing, not really enjoyed it, like missed this whole work thing, and then been all like, oh, I have to do this, when really I don't. And it's the same thing. Like, if you have to miss a meeting and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to fall in, reach out to your manager and say, hey, I have something going on. I know we have this meeting. I'm committed to being there and I'll make it work. But how bad is it if I miss it this time? And they might say it's fine. So sometimes just checking in helps you recalibrate the importance of things, because we might lose track of it in our mind when maybe in the scheme of things it's not. So that's something that has worked well for me. I would like to share some resources. These are a few. So I told you about Gwynne Shotwell. I want to talk to you about 3 other people that have really inspired me in this space. So the first is Anne Marie Slaughter. So she was a professor at Princeton, and then she worked in the State Department under Hillary Clinton. I don't remember what her job was, but it was a really big job. And she had 2 teenage kids, and she wrote this article in The Atlantic, and I'll give Bella the link so she can post all these for you. But it was basically like she wouldn't be able to do her job without her husband, and how she sort of gave up being the primary caregiver. And she was willing to let go. And she was willing to say, okay, if my husband is the primary caregiver, then it's got to go according to his rules. Because I think sometimes what families do is the primary caregiver, won't be able to do something, and they'll defer to their partner or their spouse. And they'll be like, no, you have to do it my way. And I think she was sort of like, she let go because she's like, okay, if he's in charge, he's going to do it his way. So she wrote this article in The Atlantic that became a book. Her book is called Unfinished Business, and it's all about how caregiving is not valued in America. But fascinating read. And then her husband wrote a response article in The Atlantic a couple of years later about why he put his wife's career first. which I thought was really interesting. So we'll put those notes for you. Another person who I find fascinating, her name is Catherine Zaleski. She is the co-founder of a jobs website called Power to Fly. Power to Fly started, gosh, I think it was like maybe 2015 or 2016. And they were one of the first online platforms to promote remote work. And so it was a really cool platform. Now they're doing all kinds of things. You can go to powertofly.com, and they're great. But Catherine is she used to work in some media company. I forget which one. And she was like a high flying media executive. And after she became a mom, she wrote an article apologizing because of the way she treated other women at work who had family responsibilities before she understood what it was like. So that was a very, very interesting read. And then finally, and again, there's a million more, but finally is a book by Tiffany Dufu, Dufu, called Drop the Ball. She has done lots of interesting things. I think now she works for Tory Burch's foundation. But her book is called Drop the Ball. And she wrote about how she always expected herself to be so perfect. And she had to consciously drop certain balls that weren't important in order to be able to focus on what was. And so she and her husband actually put together a giant spreadsheet of how to manage their house. They divided responsibilities, and then they each let go of the stuff they weren't responsible for. Because I think sometimes the pressure is just being in charge of stuff, reminding our partner or a spouse that they have to do something. And so for her, like she shared a story. I heard her speak a couple of years ago. She shared a story about when her husband was doing a consulting assignment in the Middle East and their kitchen faucet broke. And so she like texted him, the kitchen faucet broke, and like household repairs were his domain. And he's like, I got this. And he went and ordered a faucet and hired a plumber and got it installed. And it wasn't the faucet she would have liked. And she's like, I just can't care about it because this is his thing. He fixed the faucet. It's his thing. And so one thing that she quotes, and I don't know if this was her thing because I've heard it from other people before. They say, we're juggling lots of balls, right? That's what life is, right? It's the struggle of the juggle. It's work and it's life and it's our interest and it's our health and it's everything. She said, some balls are made out of glass and some balls are made out of rubber. So just realize which ones are okay to drop. You can drop the rubber balls because those are going to bounce back. You'll catch them another time. The glass balls, if you drop, they're going to break. And so for everyone else, right, we all have different glass balls, but I think figure out what is so important to you at this moment in time, which may be different than 5 years ago or 5 years from now, and then figure out a way to focus on that. So I think, again, finding that personal balance is going to be really, really important. Focusing on the communications is really important. And then remembering that it's not forever. Right? You're not closing down any door because your attention is focused. It may be that you'll be able to expand or shift to that fast lane of the highway, maybe in a couple of years or in a little later, or, after whatever it is going on now has resolved or is in a different place. So I think, again, it could seem very overwhelming, but really each phase in our life is kind of somewhat temporary. Unfortunately, you only realize that, after you've already experienced all of those. But
life is like seasons.
Yes, it really is. Okay, so what's next? We have a great next episode, and we are going to have, and it's not just going to be me and Patrick. We're going to invite someone to join us. And so our next episode is going to focus on hearing from women who've achieved the highest ranks of leadership in the U.S. military, and what that felt like for them, what it felt like to blaze those trails, how they were perceived, how they considered their role in shaping the future for the women that came after them. So it's going to be exciting. Have a great day, everyone. We always enjoy chatting with you.